Right words and sentence structure to communicate your ideas clearly, accurately, and vividly. Use rhetorical devices to enhance and emphasize ideas. Eliminate jargon and unnecessary words. Speech is called have a say. Timing the speech is 5 to 7 minutes. Timer.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests. At 5 minutes, the green light will come on. At 6 minutes, the amber light. And at 7 minutes, the red light will come on with a 30-second deviation after the red light.
Mr. Diaz moved to America about 8 years ago, and since then he has been working hard to improve his English. Nevertheless, sometimes a few slang words get in the way, resulting in a remarkable picture that is not easy to understand or easy to translate. Help me welcome Mr. Diaz.
My fellow Toastmasters, Mr. Toastmaster, I'm most welcome guest. By showing hands, how many of you speak fluent English? Just what I thought. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So, how many of you speak fluent Spanish? A few, good. But what about Spanglish? How many of you speak fluent Spanglish? Well, for the most of you that don't know speak Spanglish, it's your lucky day because today is Spanglish 101. Toastmaster way! Spanglish 101. What's Spanglish? Spanglish is no more or less than using English words in your Spanish, but actually keeping their original meaning, their meaning in English. Of course, you always have to Spanglishize the words just a little bit. And I'm going to give you good examples of what I'm just talking about. You have the English words, and then you have the Spanglish words. Quit, it's changed by quitear. Tank, it's changed by tanquear. Clock in, just like when you get into your workplace, it's changed by cloquear, which is actually very similar to what the hands do. And it's pretty confusing. And the phrase, I'll call you back, it's literally translated into te llamo para atrás, which actually doesn't make any sense in Spanish, grammar-wise. And likewise, watch, we can use watchar. These are just a few examples of Spanglish. Now, I've tried to subscribe as little as possible to Spanglish because, let's face it, you either speak English or you either speak Spanish. But it's pretty crazy to try to speak both at the same time, right? Now, there are a few concepts that are not familiar with you on your countries, and then you migrate to America and you get familiar with them, and you get to learn them in English. So they get so deeply ingrained in your brain that it's kind of hard to go back to your mother tongue and use the original word. One of those concepts, it's taxes. And I wonder why that is so ingrained in my mind. Never mind. Original word in Spanish for taxes is impuestos. So that's what tax means, impuestos. When you're referring to doing your taxes, you would say in English, I'm doing my taxes tomorrow, right? The exact translation in Spanish would be, yo haré mis impuestos mañana. I'm doing my taxes tomorrow. Yo haré mis impuestos mañana. By showing hands, how many of my Spanglish colleagues here use impuestos instead of taxes? No one. No one. You do, yo haré mis taxes mañana. And that's just it. Pretty remarkable, right? But when the rubber meets the pavement, Spanglish-wise, it's when you get to translate the English words, when you get to write down those words in Spanish. And I'm going to give you a very good personal experience of how this actually comes to be. About 10 years ago, I was still living in Cuba, but I had a cousin that had been living in the States for about 3 years. I remember Cuba, it's kind of an isolated place in the middle of nowhere. You don't get a lot of email. You don't have access to internet email. So you have to write down plain old letters to communicate with your family there. Well, things have changed, but back in those days, there were the begone letters that you have to write to your family. This cousin of mine wrote down a very nice letter, and he included about 20-something pictures. Pictures, actually, printed pictures, no digital pictures. Printed pictures of his life in the States. And on the back of those pictures, he included small notes describing what he was doing in the pictures. Here we are with the family at the zoo. Here we are at the beach. Here we are enjoying at the restaurant with friends and family. But there was one of those notes that actually got us puzzled for a long while. And I translated the whole note, but the Spanglish word, for you to understand what I'm talking about. He was referring to some new piece of furniture he bought. So the picture was a living room, his living room, and he was referring that he got a new living room, but what the note said was, we wanted a bigger one, but we couldn't afford it because we had too many biles. Of course, I translate everything but the word biles. We wanted a bigger one, but we couldn't afford it because we had too many biles. Now, the biles is not a Spanish word. Let's start from that point. It doesn't exist in Spanish. The closest thing to biles in Spanish is bill. We translate to vile, which is a bad person or a bad feeling. That didn't make any sense in the context of the sentence, right? We had too many biles? Well, it took us a while to realize that he was talking about bills. He couldn't afford a bigger living room because he had too many bills. Just plain nonsense. Now, in all honesty, you have to say that Spanglish is not a one-way street. It's actually a two-way street. And there are a few ways where Spanish have influenced the English that we Americans speak. A few examples: no bueno, loco, vigilante, huevos rancheros, señorita, and last but not least, living la vida loca. With that, I conclude my Spanglish 101, and I hope to see you all in Spanglish 102. Mr. Table to the